Welcome to the commentary booth, where we watch, and you guessed it, commentate on the week that was in movies and TV. I'm your host and play-by-play commentator, Jamie Apps, and each week I'm joined by a rotating cast of colour commentators to help you find your next viewing treat. This week I'm joined by an impact fee technician who lists their favourite movie as A Nightmare on Elm Street and favourite TV show as Golden Girls. Welcome to the show, Corrina Mabey.
Hello. Hello, it's midweek. Ridiculous. How's it hanging on your side of the world?
We generally record midweek. It's not that ridiculous.
I feel like it's been a week, though. Like, I don't feel like it's a Wednesday. And for you, it's fucking Thursday. So I'm kind of right and kind of not right. But I don't know. This week,
it feels like Thursday.
Week. It's going to fuck the week. Whatever.
It feels like a Thursday. It doesn't feel like a Wednesday. I'll tell you that much.
Hey, go fuck yourself. It's because it's like fucking, 10 o'clock in the morning on Thursday?
9:30.
Close fucking enough. Whatever. It's not my fault you like to be X amount of hours ahead of me.
I'm from your future.
You still can't fucking tell me the lotto numbers. So really, what good are you doing me?
That would be very helpful if we could do that.
I'm just saying, like,
especially your lottos. Ooh.
Yeah. Whatever it is, a fucking $1 billion or
Billions
something like that.
Billions of dollars. Not like, want to win $2 million? Like, no, we'll take $2 billion. Thank you very much.
I'll take $2 million. Shit, I'll take $500K. That'd do me solid.
Yeah.
I'm not looking for a lot.
So before we dive into the topic this week, as always, Pario magazine stands in solidarity and support of SAG-AFTRA in their fight for better working conditions. Our publication has always been focused on the creative brilliance of these individuals rather than on the business of film and TV. As such, we will continue to highlight their creative talents during this time so that their contributions to our entertainment are not overlooked. This week, we're getting very meta as we use our movie review podcast to review a movie about a podcast.
This is trippy.
Yeah, when I was thinking about that intro, I was like, wait, we're on a podcast that reviews movies, reviewing a movie about a podcast.
Yeah. This is I feel like over the past, I don't know, several weeks, you and I have consumed a lot of weird movies. And this is one of those very weird fucking movies that you were like, hey, we're going to watch this. And I go, sure, yeah, whatever. And yeah, we just keep rolling down this train of strange things.
Yeah, I guess that's partly the whole spooky season thing where we're watching these random horror movies that are kind of weird and wacky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Strange.
This one starts pretty normal and then gets really outrageous and weird.
Yeah, it got strange real quick.
So it's described as a high concept sci-fi. Monolith. It's about a disgraced journalist portrayed by Lily Sullivan as the only person shown on the screen during this movie, as she begins to develop her new true crime mystery podcast. And like I said, what starts out as a compelling mystery story quickly divulges into some sort of weird alien conspiracy, which kind of forces this journalist to confront her own past lies and moral failures.
So this movie was odd. Just partially I guess I did not register in my head that she was going to be the only person in this film. And halfway through you pointed it out and I go, holy shit, you're right. And you even said it, you commended her for doing such well acting for being the only person in the entire fucking movie. That has got to be a really hard job to just act and not have anybody to play off of with you.
Yeah, it was like I was having the same conversation with Blake last week about Leonardo DiCaprio in The Revenant.
Yeah.
With this one, Lily Sullivan she's talking to people, but it's all over the phone or over a Zoom call type situation.
Yeah.
But in that case, as they were filming it, I imagine all of that stuff was just her saying her lines and then having to sit there, and they may have already had the audio logs pre-recorded so she could at least hear them and react to them react to them in real time, but that's not a guarantee. She may have just been like, okay, so then they're going to say this. How would you react? Now say your
Yeah,
line.
like
Now do
yeah,
this.
having to like space out your lines perfectly too, like just so you can stay in that kind of feel like you're doing a Q&A with somebody and there's nobody there with you is got to be very, very hard. And I feel like I would lose my mind doing that. But yeah, this movie was a very, it's not a movie that I would have necessarily like probably picked on my own, just because it is such a peculiar kind of movie.
Mhm.
It's not like, I mean, it's got its like moments of like kind of suspense and stuff like that, but it's not like in your face, like constant. It's kind of slow moving. Um, and so, yeah, it is very interesting to see how it played out, and I really enjoyed it in the end.
Yeah, it's definitely got that sort of thriller vibe where it's like drip feeding you sort of bits of information as you go along, and you're trying to like put all the puzzle pieces together to work out what the heck is going on in this movie. And
Mm-hmm.
then it takes this big spin and it's like, oh, okay, now I get it. And it's very strange. But for me, I wasn't like the biggest fan of the spin at the end where it really got like outrageous and off the wall. Whereas that first sort of half hour, 40 minutes when it was like this weird, like investigative podcast, like kind of true crimey stuff, I thought that was really interesting. And yeah, Lily's performance, well done to her, because that would have been horribly hard.
Yeah, I feel like this movie, like you said, it did start out really, really strong, but yeah, for me it kind of fell flat and just kind of went a little cheesy almost towards the end. And for the better part too, like it dragged, or parts of it felt like it really dragged. And I don't know if that was just because the pacing was a little bit slower than what I'm used to, or if it was because there was nobody else on the screen except for her. But
Mhm.
just parts of it seem to just continuously like go on and on. And I'm like, are we going to get to the point now?
That, and there's no like big, thrilling, exciting action moments or anything like that. It's just a lot of one person in one room talking to a computer screen or a microphone or a telephone. Like, occasionally she'll walk outside to have a smoke or walk into a different room to have something to eat, but a lot of the time it's one person sitting at a desk for an entire movie. It's yeah. I can see how a lot of people would look at that and be like, I'm not really enthralled by this. I'm giving up.
Also, there wasn't, if I'm like, you can correct me if I'm wrong, there wasn't a lot of background music to this movie, or a lot of like interact, like obviously there's not a lot of interaction, but there wasn't like a huge like soundtrack to just like keep the pace going and things like that. It was just very like quiet because she's in a place by herself, and the only time you hear anything is when she's interviewing people. So I feel like that probably for me is why I kind of had those moments of like, oh god, this is really like lengthy.
Yeah, I think that's probably also the fact that it's like leaning into that whole podcast thing where you want a nice quiet space.
Hmm.
So yeah, they're probably like, see, soundtracks never really jump out at me unless they're like jarring, like they just don't feel right. So like
Oh,
if there was any soundtrack there, I probably wouldn't have noticed it. But if there wasn't, I also probably wouldn't notice it. Like I kind of expect scores and soundtracks to they affect. Yeah, I feel like they a soundtrack and a score should like impact you emotionally, but you shouldn't really notice it. I think that's for me that's the sign of a good score where it has an impact on you, but it's not something where you're like, oh, I'm just listening to this music now. You should still be in the moment with the story, and not being sitting there and well, that's a cool soundtrack.
I don't know. I enjoy, I guess, well, I think it also maybe depends on the movie itself, but like for me, when I'm watching like an eerie or suspenseful film, I always pick up on like the like small or like the low like orchestra kind of scores and stuff like that. Like I don't know, sometimes the soundtrack for me makes the movie. Obviously, like you have the most like known soundtracks. Like when you hear the beginning of the Exorcist theme or the Halloween theme and stuff like that, like those are really like memorable. So I always am on the lookout for things like that. And obviously, like, yeah, this did not have that. So I guess it might have been intentional though, just to kind of keep the pace of the whole, like, it's a quiet environment and nothing's gonna like interrupt her.
Yep. Yeah. Again, Saw comes up for me with soundtracks like the iconic Saw theme when it's like, oh, here's the big reveal and the Saw theme
It's the
plays.
same.
So, like,
yeah.
Okay. But that's one where I do notice it because it's such an iconic soundtrack and theme song, and Marvel movies, like they all have like the Loki theme and the Thor theme and stuff like that. Like those ones I expect it from, but like these sort of more artsy movies where I generally don't notice the scores, which is
it's because you can't hear them probably because like you have to turn your TV all the way up. Old age will do that to you.
Smart ass.
Anywho.
Yeah, we mentioned Lily Sullivan and her performance. Do you know what else she's been in this year?
No, she looked so unfamiliar. Like I had no clue who the hell she was. Should I know who she is?
You should, because she was in one of the movies you really enjoyed this year.
Oh, was she? What was she in? If
Evil
you give
Dead
me some
Rise.
bullshit. Oh, was she? Oh, shit. See, for me, Evil Dead Rise, I love it so much, but like, I guess I just don't pay attention. And also, like, when people are all bloody and like, bleh, I didn't put two and two together.
I think she was like the main character in Evil Dead Rise.
Again, bleh, dead.
No, she wasn't the main one. She might have been the
sister.
Yeah, she was the one that survived.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
She wasn't the like monster one. She was the other one.
Oh, well, she wasn't that important then. If she didn't turn into a zombie and start eating people, I don't care.
Fair enough. And then, yeah, so there weren't any other actors shown on screen, but we did get some voices. We got the Australian actor Eric Thompson as her father. He's been in Australian shows All Saints and Pact of the Rafters. So as soon as his voice popped up, I was like, I know that guy. And then we had Kate Box as Laura, one of the other voices. She's been in Rake, Wentworth, and Deadlock. And Damon Harriman, as another voice, has been in Justified. He was Charles Manson in Mindhunter and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Oh, okay.
So some of the voice actors were like pretty highly regarded, but yeah, they kind of just did voice roles, which is probably a interesting like twist for them to do that. I wonder if they recorded in a sound booth, because recording that way versus recording normally like in front of a camera makes for a very different performance. Yeah,
because it's kind of like when people do cartoon voiceovers, like they just have to kind of get into their character, and they, for that particular role, they even had a harder challenge because they didn't even have like a drawing of what their character should look like because their character never hit the scene. Whereas like, at least when you're a cartoon, you can kind of see what that character is supposed to look like and try to put your own twist on it. But this was just very cut and dry, like the talk.
yeah, like they weren't asked to do weird and wacky voices. It was just like, hey, be yourself. I imagine they were given like, here's like a background biopack of this is what the character is. But apart from that, it was kind of just like, talk as if you're on the phone.
Yeah, I don't know if I could get into that mindset of just standing in a room and kind of having a conversation with yourself. Sounds so strange.
Yep. Yeah, so I was impressed by all of the performances, even though 99% of them are not seen. They're just heard.
Yeah, it's very weird.
And so, yeah, in terms of like the plot, we mentioned it starts with this interesting premise of a journalist developing a new podcast, which they titled Beyond Believable, which is actually a really good podcast title name. I'm surprised there isn't one like that. And it focuses on mysteries, conspiracies, true crime, spooky stories. That's where the whole concept kind of falls away because it's a very broad podcast. And then we quickly learn that this journalist has been discredited and is facing a pretty major defamation lawsuit, or has just like got through a major defamation lawsuit. And as the movie went on, I was like, I kind of agree with this lawsuit.
Yeah, she was a straight up like trash journalist. Like when they say like the scummy journalism, that is what I envision, is just someone who is very like gross and sleazy. Like she literally was just such an ass. Like, I'm not recording you, but I'm secretly recording you and you don't fucking know, or I'm gonna tell you halfway through that, oh yeah, by the way, I recorded our conversation. Like, is that cool?
Yeah, that was like, her morals were just all over the place in this movie, because yeah, she records calls from the outset, and then like partway through is like, and by the way, I'm recording this. It's like, no.
What? Yeah.
That's,
And
it's not only morally wrong, it's actually illegal to
illegal.
do that without informing someone.
Yeah. Like, what the fuck? I can't believe that like she's still okay with doing that, even though she got through doing that entire lawsuit. Is her whole backstory. She's still like, I'm just gonna do my own thing and keep doing it the way I'm doing it. Fuck it.
Mhm. And then she also like heavily edits the conversations to twist the narrative, which is also pretty scummy thing to do, but sadly a somewhat common practice.
Yeah, I feel like you can definitely see that, especially if you watch like multiple different news outlets or like entertainment outlets. You can definitely tell if they're reporting on the same story, like how they've edited certain clips when they're provided the same clip, and they just like edit it a certain way that they want.
They take the key sound bites that support the narrative that they want in the story, which is a bit gross.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And then on that fact, her publisher in this movie or editor is not good,
No.
because they just hurriedly publish the episodes because they're on this deadline without fact checking or anything, editorial oversight, which, given her history, actually pretty risky in terms of the publisher.
Yeah, that should be like the first thing you do, is like verify the sources, verify that this is all accurate, that everybody is like dotted the I's, crossed the T's kind of moment. And you did none of that. You were just like, oh yeah, this sounds like a great story. Let's keep going with it.
And like in doing that, I think it does a great job of capturing that whole sort of podcast aesthetic, and really gives you that sort of desperation from her to try and get her next big story, to kind of like, if I break this big story, everyone will forget about this thing in the past. But
Yeah.
like, in doing so, she's kind of just history repeating itself, which is pretty gross.
Yeah, she was just a mess. She, as a journalist, she is just a hot mess, and it's rough. But yeah, like you said, it's unfortunately an accurate portrayal of a lot of the media nowadays. Just to get a story, you'll do just about anything.
And then like as the movie went on, I think the thing that really jumped out at me is there's that like one voice character, I can't remember which one it was, but they sort of start to call her out for her practices, and one of them says like, not everything needs to be published, and that as a journalist you have a duty of care to the public in terms of what you do publish. I thought they were really important lines to pick up on, and at that point it's when her character begins like lashing out and attacking anyone that sort of challenges her on her process.
Yeah, I think that was like the like professor or something that she kept trying to reach out to, that had done like work on something before, and they weren't like returning her calls or emails immediately or something like that. Is what I thought. I think that's what that character was, or who that was.
Yeah, I think she spoke to a professor who'd also like been researching these languages, and then she spoke to another journalist as well who was like, yeah, you don't need to publish everything. Like,
yeah, don't do it.
It's like we're seeing with the Israel-Palestine war at the moment. Like, maybe we don't need to publish everything immediately. Let's fact check all of this stuff first.
Yeah, it's a mess, but it's like art imitating life, essentially, because it's literally spot on.
And like with the way the movie conveys all of this messaging, I thought it did a really good job of touching on those topics of ethics, morals, even gets into some sort of mental health, depression, suicide areas as well.
Mm-hmm.
But in doing that, it was also really hard to become emotionally invested in this character because she is so like despicable in the way she goes about her practices, where you kind of strangely, I wanted her to get her comeuppance, not to find success with this story.
Yeah, she was such a. It's like I have a love-hate relationship with her because on one hand it's like, oh, she's a struggling journalist who just wants to get back on her feet, but at the same time, you put yourself in that fucking position and you're still doing it. Um and I
Struggling
just can't.
journalist as well. Mm,
Yeah,
her
well,
family seems to be pretty loaded. I think she'll be fine.
yeah, that's true. But it's just like you're not changing anything about the way that you did stuff before to get yourself in this situation. So why should I give a shit? Like crash and burn.
Yeah, like she hasn't learnt anything to like,
No.
oh yeah, maybe that wasn't the best way to go about it. So, but she just continues like, oh well, yeah, if you get screwed over again, well, you get screwed over again. And I think that's where the movie starts to become also interesting, but then it starts to fall apart as well because you have that whole like, oh, what is this mystery? Like, is there someone like trying to get revenge on her for what she's done? Like, is it all playing out like that? But then the mystery becomes like really outlandish with this whole concept of viral hysteria spreading through sound and spreading through other people hearing the story of these black bricks,
Yeah.
which is a bit like strange. And then we get into like psychosis, hallucinations, a doppelganger at one point.
Yeah, that was
She
fucking.
vomits
Ugh.
up the black brick that's like this big. It's like,
I'm telling you, like, I've seen a lot of gross shit in my life. Like, I've watched Human Centipede and not blinked an eye. I watched Hostel, same thing. Nowadays, I'm feeling like there are certain scenes that just are like uncomfortable. They're not gross, but they are uncomfortable to watch.
yeah, I think the black brick thing was uncomfortable because you're like, yeah, that would actually, that's not just gross, but like that would be really painful.
Yeah, like what we watched Appendage recently, and that had uncomfortable things in it. Like that looked really uncomfortable. That fucking Men movie you made me watch. Again, more uncomfortable shit.
Yeah,
Like
that was weird.
not necessarily like gross factor like blood and guts, but just like uncomfortable because these are things that in your head you feel like that that could potentially maybe kind of happen. Like sure, it's a little far fetched that I'm gonna throw up an entire fucking brick, but you could still throw up a big fucking ball of something if you ain't feeling so hot. So it's a very uncomfortable thing to have to watch.
Mhm. And like we even get into sort of a bit of time manipulation in this too, and that's where it starts to fall apart for me because they've got all of these different elements and they weave together in parts, but then in other parts they kind of contradict each other as well. And it's like, okay, we've kind of tried to do too much, which was a bit
Yeah.
disappointing. Like I feel like if they'd stripped it back and just focused on maybe one or two elements, the overall movie would have been much stronger because they could have fleshed those out a bit more.
Yeah, it was like they were trying to hit way too many genres and please too many people because I feel like they kind of are seeing what's on trend right now and they just want to follow like all of the trends in one film. And yeah, it just gets really sloppy and kind of like mushed and becomes unclear as to what direction they're really trying to go with it.
Mhm. Yeah, I think if they'd stuck with the whole, for me, the coolest concept was the viral hysteria spreading through sound and other people hearing the stories, because I think that acts as like a great metaphor for like social media and podcasts and stuff, like propagating the whole fake
Mm-hmm.
news concept. And with it being a
Yeah,
movie about a podcast, I thought that could have been a really compelling line to look into and put under the microscope and expand a bit more.
of course. Yeah, it's like gossip is just traveling, and then more and more people are getting involved in it. Like, oh, did you hear about this? Like, oh, you know.
Yeah, like we probably didn't need to bring in time travel and like was it aliens?
I don't really know what the fuck it was supposed to be. I just know that she threw up a brick with some black goo, and it was just, and she was getting chased by like something that looked like her. And I'm like, all right, well,
Yeah,
that's been fun.
she shatters the brick, and then the brick becomes her.
Her, yeah, it was a really strange kind of concept. I don't know. It was weird.
And then, like, after that, in a spoiler, we get like this big major twist that I thought was really well done, and I think would have worked better if we had taken away a lot of those alien time manipulation elements. Like, with she finds out her housekeeper was actually the first woman she interviewed for the podcast, and the brick that was stolen from her was actually stolen by the journalist's father. It's like, it became this really cool, big, circular revenge plot, but it just had all of this, like, smoke and cloud crap in the middle.
Yeah, like this unnecessary, like sci-fi kind of vibe to it that didn't really work at all.
Yeah, so, yeah, like we said,
I don't know.
a bit more editing, cleaning up, not even in, like, the cinematography or what was actually on the film. It needed to be really refined in the concept script stages.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it was filmed really well. The shots were great. You know, the acting was phenomenal. Excuse me. The set was really pretty. Like, I don't know where they filmed it. But it was a really nice, it was a super nice fucking house. And like even the outside was just like really like quiet and like, you know, just calm, kind of like where you would expect someone to run away to, where they can't like really be found by a lot of people, just they want to get away from everybody. So I loved that, but yeah, definitely just need to clean up a little bit of the storytelling aspect of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think from memory it was filmed in either Victoria or South Australia's like hinterland area, like up in the mountain areas. Which was, yeah, very cool, like, location, an insanely huge house and like architecturally designed house. Very bare bones inside as well, which is a bit strange. But
Yeah,
it's
it was
a
just very
modern, very modern Australian architectural house.
Yeah, it was
Reminded me a lot of the house in Kiama on the Hill that they filmed Invisible Man and the Russell Crowe movie Poker Face.
Okay. I remember seeing that house from like the highway.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the Invisible Man house.
Yeah, it's a really cool looking house, but it's just I don't know. It's very very modern and contemporary, and yeah, I can't get around that. Like I would feel like I was in prison. Like that's what it reminded me of. Like instead of wanting to like get away, I feel like that would have been a prison for me. Like,
yeah, stark, like concrete marble everywhere. It's like, it feels like a very cold house in the mountains of Victoria it would just be freezing. You'd need some very, very good central air and heating. The other big question I had at the end of the movie, because it leaves you with this big lingering question, which version of Lily Sullivan's character survived? Was it the real Lily or the fake Lily?
I'm going full-blown doppelganger over here because I feel like the main Lily was just a weak-ass bitch in the end. And so I feel like she I don't feel like she would have been able to actually like handle her self-reflection. I feel like that's what this is kind of supposed to be about, almost like, or that doppelganger is supposed to be like a reflection of herself. And I feel like if she were to encounter that, she wouldn't have survived. So I feel like her doppelganger is probably the one lurking around.
Yeah, I think from like the stories we were hearing from some of the other people she was interviewing, I think that that's what this whole alien race, whatever the heck they were, was doing. They were finding people that had heard the stories and then using their stories to then manipulate them and take over their lives. So I'm pretty sure she was taken over and the real Lily is floating in that dam somewhere.
Good. Good fucking riddance. Hopefully your alien doppelganger is not as shady as you are.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It seemed more intent and violent, so it was maybe slightly more morally bankrupt, but she
It's
didn't.
fine. It's fine.
She was on the poverty line of morals.
Yeah, I was gonna say she didn't really have a whole lot going for her anyway. If anything, this one's just kind of pushing her to the edge that she was afraid to actually cross.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I think the doppelganger was just taking her personality to the extreme, and I think she lost that fight. So yeah, in terms of an overall rating, what would you give Monolith?
So unfortunately, I actually have to go low on this movie. I'm actually gonna just give it a 2. And it's not that I hated it, it's just I wouldn't go back to it, number 1. I would suggest someone watching it on streaming if you don't have really anything else to watch. And it was just too mushy, like too wishy-washy and all over the place, kind of like a plate of spaghetti. For me to really be able to recommend it to a lot of people. I feel like you really have to pay attention to this, and it's going to take a certain kind of person to watch it just because it's not everyone's cup of tea. Like, not everybody's going to sit there for almost 2 hours watching one person on a screen talking over the phone and stuff.
Yeah, I think I would probably fall in around that same range. Like, for me, I enjoyed it as someone that does podcasts and sort of is in that journalistic field. But yeah, like we've mentioned throughout this episode, just needed a lot of refinement from the story concepting and the scripting phases. But once they actually got onto set, everything that was produced on set was fantastic. Lily's performance, the voice actors, all the cinematography, they really captured the vibe of the podcaster in a remote location and stuff like that. But yeah, the concept just gets a little outlandish and a little convoluted. Just shave some bits, and I think this would have been a much more compelling movie.
Yeah, like I said, I appreciate the cinematography and big kudos to everybody who is in it. But yeah, like just yeah, that storyline. If it had just been a little bit more refined and they had just stayed on one track, I probably would have rated it a lot higher.
Yeah, it's definitely a wait for streaming, wait for a quiet period when there isn't a lot of stuff coming out, and then maybe check it out.
Pop it on.
Just be forewarned that it's 2 hours of one person on screen with some kind of crazy, wacky stories. So be prepared for that. Alrighty. Thank you everyone for listening to the commentary booth. If you enjoyed the show, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe on podcast services and on YouTube. You can follow Corrina on Instagram at Miss Corrina Renee, and you can follow me on social media at JamieUps Media and at Pario Magazine. The Commentary Booth is a fan-funded production of JamieUps Media. You can support the podcast alongside our magazine, Pario Magazine, on Patreon at patreon.com/JamieUps Media. The following people supported at the publisher level or higher, and you cannot fathom how incredibly appreciative we are for their support.